Once you open Rhino, sometimes you will see a pop-out window which allows you to select a template. We will always use large objects millimeter. Today's lecture is about the standard toolbar, which is on top of your screen. The first one is to create a new. Once you place your mouse over a toolbar, you will see a small icon which now reads as new, but also indicate that you should click on your left mouse for this case. So if we select large object millimeter, we'll just create a new file. And then certainly you can open a file or save a file. If you would like, for example, when I put my mouse over save, I have two options. If I click on my left mouse, it would be save. If I click on my right mouse, it would become export, which then you can read your command line, which says select object to export. Now we don't have any object. I can create anything right here. And as I wish, I could use one of my better display mode. And then in this case, I could do the same thing and export. So since I already select the object, I can now export to anywhere. Maybe I would just put it on my desktop and say, or I would put to my folder, a course folder. And I would say 1. Okay, so in this case, I exported only this one object from my file. This can be used if you have multiple objects, but you want to separate them. You want to select certain object to export, but then you want to leave other object as untouched. For example, I have another object here. What I could also do is to right-click on Save button. As you can read on the command line, says select object to export, and I select only one of the object, and then press Enter when done. One thing need to be emphasized is that you always want to read your command line, where contains a lot of useful information. So for example, in this case, it asks you to press Enter when done, so we just press Enter. So then now I can export as a different file and call it 2. Okay, so now if we go back, we don't save this file now. If we go back to where we exported, if we open 2, which contains only one object. Some of the commands are not that useful. We don't normally need to use. For example, cut. I have not used it. Copy, I would say, might be useful in some case. I think if I click on copy, and probably I go to edit and click on paste. Now I have 2 objects. However, you can always use your pull-down menu. As I said, there's always, the pull-down menu and the toolbar are basically duplicates of each other. So anything that you'll be able to use under toolbar, you should also have under your pull-down menu. So I would introduce some of the more important one. For example, this one is to undo. So in the case if I want to undo, I should click on my left mouse. If I want to redo, I should click on my right mouse. So if I click on my left mouse, undo. Or if I click on my right mouse, redo. Yeah. And the next button is pen. Pen simply means to, to drag your screen so that you can see what you really want to see. And And if I want to pan here, I could do this as well. Yeah. So the next one is orbit. Okay. Mostly you will use orbit for the perspective view. So orbit, to look at your object from different angle. Okay. And zoom in and out. Certainly you can use your mouse. And you can also zoom in. For example, if I'm in my top view and I'm going to select zoom a window, or I really would like to look at only this one object. Sorry, you have to click on the button, the toolbar, in order for it to function. So the next one is called the zoom extend. For example, now select your top view or your front view. In this case, let me select my front view. What you need to do is you need to click on the view. So if I click on my front view, I selected the front view to be where I would like to apply the command. So I click on zoom extend. The next one is zoom selected. So if I select this object and I click on my perspective view and say zoom selected, so it will zoom into the object that you selected. The next one is undo view change. So if I click on undo view change, it would go back to the previous view. Or if I mess around a little bit, and then I apply undo view change again, it would go back to the previous view. In this case, it doesn't change the object or apply any new command, it changes only the view. So the next one is called for viewports. If I click on it, I should have a lot of other options. So for example, I just applied the one window which maximize the only window that I selected, or I can go back and select 4 viewports. Let's select the only maximize the one window for now. Okay, it's a little bit slow, so in case you want to switch between your view or your windows, the better way is double click on the tag. So if I double click on top view, the top view will become the only one that you will see. If I double click again on the top view, all 4 of them will come out. So I don't think this will be very useful because there's a easier way to deal with this. The next one that I have not used, we could try, is called the right view. So basically, which sets your view to, for example, that this is a top view, this looks like a bottom view, and there are other views as well. If I want to go back to my perspective view, I suppose is this one. The next button I would skip for now because it's rather complicated. I will talk about later. The one after it is object snaps. For example, this is to snap to end, or let's select the center. Let's say if I draw a line that if I apply to the center, so yeah, it looks like it's going to snap to the center, and then you can press enter. So this line goes into the center of the sphere. So however, I do not use this very often. I don't think it's very useful because we have another object snap underneath your screen, which is more direct and easier to manage. So the next one is called select. This I will leave it for future. This basically will give you many different options to select lines or surface or closed poly surface. So I will leave this one for future. The next button that I can introduce to you now, which is called the visibility. It doesn't move, feels like a little bit slow. Okay, so what I can do is I select an object and then I click on hide. Okay, now I could show the object. Remember that one of them is hidden, so if I click on show object, it will come out. So let's do another one. For example, I select this object and then this is probably more useful, which is lock. So once you lock the object, you won't be able to select. You will not be able to modify or do anything with it. So this will help you in case you do not want any of the object to be modified or touched or accidentally moved. The lock is a good option to use. Of course, you can also unlock. So there's also the next button to it is really about lock. Looks like these two are very similar. Yeah, these two panels are very similar. These two toolbars are very similar. So the next one is called the layer. Okay, click on it. So by now we have only to our right. This is the panel for the layer, which by now we have only one called the default. We could add a new one. If you don't change, it's called the layer 1, but we could call it surface, for example. Or we could continue to add layers. So when I add layers, for example, there's a line here. So I would like to put this line under the line layer rather than under the default layer. So in this case, you could organize your file and put different things to different layers. So if you can, for example, if let's move this line to the layer of line. So what I do is I click on line and select it and right click. There's an option called change object layer. Since I already selected line, so I just click on change object layer. Okay, so now this line should be on the line layer. So what I can do is I can hide. So you can see the line is hidden now. So the same way I can create a surface and then put it on the surface layer. So I could also create a layer called solid. And I could put one of the bow to solid, select, right click and change object layer. So once I've done that, I could also hide. So in this case, layer is a very good way to organize your file. Okay, so there are other options. For example, you can duplicate a layer, or it's called a new sublayer, which most of the time this is really getting complicated. You could try, but for this class we don't really need that to manage the layer at such complex level. So we'll skip that. And you can certainly delete layer. So once you delete layer, but there's a reminder because you actually have some object on the layer, so it will not automatically just delete. So the window pops out. You could certainly say yes. In this case, I delete the layer as well as all the items on that layer. So this is pretty much sufficient for now for layers. What I can also do is I can change the color of the layer. If I change the color to red, so you can see the line looks reddish rather than black. That's just something that it doesn't really have a lot of application to it. So let's close layer so that we have enough window space, and let's click on another toolbar, which is called the property. let me dock this one to the right. So okay, property, if I click on object, that the property will show what this object is and which layer it's on and certain information. And there's something called for example, there's something called the ISO curve. The ISO curve is the line that you see on the object. You can change the density of the ISO curve. Yeah, it doesn't change the object, it only changes how the ISO curve is displayed. And I can also select the invisible, so all this ISO curve disappeared. I could also click on details, which then will tell me, what this object is, and is a surface object, is a closed surface, and has other information to it. We'll come to all of this at a later time. So let's close this. For now, we have sufficient knowledge about the layer and also about the property. The next one is called shade, which I normally never use because you simply just changing the display mode to shade. So I would prefer to use my display mode such as I'm blue. Yeah. So this isn't very useful, as well as this. The next one is render. We almost never need to render. We wouldn't learn too much about rendering, but I'm just simply click on it and show that this look a little awkward. I don't know if I'm really rendering the right drawing. I probably did. Yeah, it's just simply, because there's no material or no lighting attached to it. However, rendering will be introduced in my elective, so if you're interested in rendering, go and take the elective. Okay, so that's pretty much it. All the rest is really that this is to create a light, which is also part of the rendering. So options, yeah, this is just a shortcut that directly goes to Rhino options. You could certainly go to Tools and click on Options, which will bring out the same window. Another little toolbar right here are both for V-Ray and for rendering, so we will skip them. So we'll stop here for this lecture on standard toolbar.